So when we left off the film, I'd been dealing with cancer for a year and a half. Well, to bring it up to date, for the first 3 years, from the starting point, a year and a half after our last film, I was dealing with it just holistically. Severe diet, macrobiotic, which is mainly brown rice and vegetables with, a little bit of fruit, a little fish, and little walnuts and beans, and really restricted. And exercise, 5 to 10 miles a day walking, and supplementation. And at that time, I was doing really $1,500 a day or a month worth of supplements. And of course, you couldn't keep that up. But over that 3 years, I kind of evolved everything. I evolved the diet to adding more fish and more fruit. And in my estimation, the diet was more philosophical and physiological. And the irony of it is that the macrobiotic program evolved almost to exactly what I evolved to, right? Adding more fish, fruit, more beans, and occasionally egg and that sort of thing. And I also left myself the option of going loose every week or something, having bacon and eggs or something or other. And I think that was critical because moderation is probably more critical than severity. The supplements, I kind of gave up on some of the more expensive ones and kind of evolved. And remember, there's no guidelines. I mean, it's what it boils down to is that you're setting your own course, following your own intuition. And I think that's what's going to work because we're all different. Anyway, I managed to get by for 3 years, functioning normally. But after 3 years, I had a PET scan and found out that my liver was totally engulfed in tumors, and to the tune of like 12 centimeters, and it was just huge tumors. And so up here in Humboldt County, there was nothing they could do for me. They didn't know. So I went down to a hospital in Huntington Beach, where my daughter's the CEO, and met with an oncologist, and he said, if you don't do anything, you've probably got 2 weeks. He said, but if I've got a program that I can put you on that I think we can get you a couple months. But interestingly, prior to that, he and I basically interviewed each other. And this is what I'm starting to take charge of my own treatment and my own course. And so he convinced me that, or first of all, he put a value on everything I was doing, which no one in the medical field did at the time that I encountered anyway. And so, but he was kind of like not a big bear, he was like a hugging teddy bear, right? And so, and I instinctively knew that, and I specifically asked him, I said, can you help me? And he said, yes, I think so. And so I said, okay, because I was weighing whether to do anything in the way of chemo or surgery compared to just, my holistic approach. But so I decided to go in this program he put me on, which was Avastin and Timicil. It's got several names, but it's, and so we started that treatment 4 years ago in October, so almost 4 years, and I survived. In fact, I've gone through several oncologists, several clinics, and they've come and gone. And in fact, they built a new hospital down there, and they were starting it. I thought I'd never see it. And so now I've been using a hospital for a year and a half. And there's nobody there when I started. I mean, it's all new people. And so that's how long I've been there. And it's, in the beginning, the side effects were tolerable, but effective. I go down every 3 weeks. And the first week after the treatments, I was affected. I mean, I could function, but there were side effects. But then I kept experimenting with different different ways of dealing with it without going into detail. But then but either I've grown a tolerance to it, or I've learned how to control the side effects, where really there's none. And that's been almost 4 years. And so we're reaching the point where you're not, the one drug, Avastin, you're not supposed to be on for more than 3 years. So we've kind of reached that point where we need to change, because most chemos tend to lose effectiveness after a while, or collectively your system just can't really handle, all the collective toxins. So now I'm dealing with that now, and there's a couple other options that don't seem too interesting, and I'm even considering going off chemo for a while and trying to give my system a break, because no matter what you're taking, it's going to affect your heart and your other systems, immune system. But that's the chemo approach. Now, what I think has really made it better or helped my tolerance for the chemo is all these things I do on the side, the holistic aspects. Number one is probably diet. I'll just say in order, not of importance. Number two would be exercise, which everyone recognizes. I don't care if you got cancer, heart problems, MS, or whatever. Those are essential for everyone. And the diet being basically vegetarian. The third would be the supplementation. The fourth would be probably research, right? Continually researching and getting as much information as you can, because I think it's extremely important that you make your own decisions, and I do. I listen to I listen to all kinds of people, and then I make my own decision. And I'm at the point now where they trust my decision, and so they'll go along with it, because there's no one in my situation. Nobody's gone this far, and so there's no knowledge on it. There's no experimentation or test cases or anything. So, and I'm at the point where I'll probably make that decision within the next couple of months. As I mentioned earlier in the film, community is incredibly important. Not only the community support, but being totally involved in the community. And I do that with art, the cartooning, just being on hand for anybody who needs help or advice, and or being a friend. And it's just like a total community involvement, which is, and if you have that, I mean, that's enormous in terms of, getting well. Being not goal-oriented, but just having projects going all the time that are bigger than you. And I probably would add that they would have to be not self-serving, but projects would be for the benefit of the community. So in other words, what you're going to do and what you're going to leave to the community. Then there's a spiritual side, and I deal with all levels of spirituality, and I think I'm very spiritual, without qualifying it any further. I'm not much of a joiner, or I have my own theories that relate only to me, and I think that pertains to everyone. Once they've gotten specific and personal with whatever their beliefs are, then it's like their beliefs can be like no one else's, and that's a search in itself. So, and of course, my contribution really there is the art, and that is incredibly therapeutic, because there's you're involved in a project, and for some reason, that kind of involvement probably is most important in the sense that you're not focusing on yourself. And if I sat around and thought about having cancer all day long, I think that you couldn't deal with it. But my theory is you deal with it one day at a time, and now and then I'll think about tomorrow if I have to schedule an appointment or something. But that's about the extent of it. But in the beginning, I kind of operated on maybe I didn't have that much time, so it was like short-term projects. Now I'm starting to think of long-term projects, and I guess the last is, and adding to the community aspect is helping other people. And if you can set an example, and the key word is giving people hope. Because I found that if I had to put it in terms of importance, I'd say your mind is 90% of your cure. And that of course involves everything, the community aspects, your research, your every aspect. And if you're positive, it seems that you get positive results. And if you're negative, it seems you get negative results. And of course the question is, how do you stay positive when somebody tells you got 3 months to live? Especially if you're 55 years old and your whole life's ahead of you, and you've never done anything wrong. You don't smoke, you don't drink, and you run. You're happy, you contribute, and yet you get nailed. And this is very difficult because you're not ready for it. You led the perfect life. And why are you getting nailed? And I'm continually dealing with, well, not all friends, but I'm being sought out now because with newly diagnosed cancer patients, and the first thing they're dealing with is the shock and the fear of dying, and it's always a surprise, and I go back to when I encountered it. I thought I was healthy as a horse, and I walked in and expected to find out that I had a slight problem, and he said, "You got 3 months to live." First he said, "You look like you can handle it. I'm going to give it to you straight up. You got 3 months." And it was a shock like I can't describe. But there's a non-acceptance too. I mean, so all of a sudden it's like you're thrown off course. And I remember I thought about it for about a minute and a half, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to go out and go for a little walk." So my wife and I went out, walked around the block, and my knees were kind of shaking, right? But that lasted 5 minutes or so, and I said, "Wait a minute, it's okay." But he said, basically, get your affairs in order. And so, but I was following that line of reasoning, and so I said, "Okay, I've got 3. What am I going to do in the next 3 months, in terms of scoring away everything?" And I followed that line of advice. For about 2 weeks, but at that point, that's how I handle it. But I immediately was able to get rid of the fear aspect and be objective about it. And then your concerns are who you're leaving. My grandkids were little and all this, and so there was that trauma. But after about 3 weeks, actually it was about a month, I went up to get surgery up at Fred Hutchinson Center in Seattle, and the oncologist said, I just read your case file, and he said, it was pretty brutal the way you were informed, and he said, I want to tell you, there's hope. And there was nothing medically to prove there was hope, but also I thought, well, wait a minute, why am I buying into this? And I said, I'm not buying this anymore. So I did a whole change, and decided I wasn't going to let that data affect me. But anyway, getting back to the fear concept, everyone seems to handle it differently, and but ironically enough, everyone I've dealt with has accepted it and either decided to die or to survive. The fear thing doesn't really last that long. You either go into a positive, I'm going to tackle it head on, or you're going to accept it and die. So, but I suppose if the fear persisted, it would be pretty hard to be positive about your approach. And that's where support comes in, because there's really nobody in the medical field that's going to support you. And it's changing. When I first got diagnosed, there was no credence given to anything preventative. It was all this was fact. So. I'm not a caregiver, but as a friend or somebody who just is ready to do what he can, I think the one thing that I can do is give that individual hope. And because in my situation, the minute I heard that word hope, it just changed everything. And I went from being defensive to offensive. And when you do that, you're in the battle. And all of a sudden, it's that's probably the most positive thing you can do. But also, it's probably second in importance is listening, and that's in any situation. I mean, and if you can learn to listen and really hear what they're saying, it's not so much for your benefit, but if you can convince them that you're listening. I mean, I don't know how many times I go to the doctor and they're kind of waiting for me to finish, but in giving them hope, I can give them an example. I can say, my cancer was like the worst case scenario. It's worse than pancreatic, or it's in terms of its survival rate. And so I can speak with a certain amount of authority, only since I've been successful for 6.5 years, and that's a long time. And I also try to I would advise somebody on all the things we discuss on how you approach it, because it's essential for that caregiver to get them started on the battle. I mean, the war's there, right? We're going into battle right now, and we're going to go out and start the battle even when we're not ready. And but we're going to survive, and we're going to prevail. And so it's not only hope, but it's giving them a positive way to deal with it. And all the people I deal with come from totally different spiritual levels. I mean, but once you have this thing in common, cancer, a reality sets in that supersedes everything, and so it doesn't matter what all those specific. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican or Catholic or Protestant, and it boils down to one thing: we all don't want to hear we're dying, and that's our biggest fear. I mean, people who are healthy. I mean, there's that fear that that's what they're afraid of dying, and the irony of it is that once you're told you're dying, you're free of the fear. And then it comes back to old Roosevelt's famous statement, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And I really think that in most cases it's the fear of dying that kills you. Now that we've been, by we I mean me and the medical community, have had roaring success for 4 years, inevitably the reality sets in, and that, or the practical side is, how long can we keep this up? And you go from the excitement of success to business as usual, taking it for granted, and then to the reality of it's costing too damn much money. And so we're not so excited anymore. But I'm thinking if those people down in the hospital saw this tape, and they say, well, wait a minute, we don't feel that way. I think just in general that applies. So I guess the moral of the story is, at what cost do we keep me or anyone alive? And it's like the relative that wears out his welcome. He comes in for a visit and stays, and you're happy for a while. But then after a while, then the reality of what it costs supersedes whatever benefits there are. So, so the moral of the story is, if you hang around too long, you're probably in trouble. The one aspect I didn't mention in terms of what really works for the cure is humor. And in fact, humor may be the most important thing. The ability to laugh at yourself, and of course it's been a standing joke that even in town here that the support I got would have been so great if they knew I was going to live so long. And the same thing kind of applies to the medical world. And initially, and I'm not speaking for myself so much, but just generally, you kind of go through the three cycles. The first being to save you at all costs, and then there's the success of having pulled it off, and then it kind of evolves to the mundane aspects of business as usual, and then it starts getting costly, and become aware of exactly how much it's costing to keep you alive, and then the obvious things that would follow there, and what do you do? And unfortunately, that's a price of success, because any way you look at it, unless you can do it holistically, you're going to price yourself out of the game over a period of time. It's like you can't stay in an expensive hotel forever, and even as nice as it is. I've been in that hotel for like in this case, almost 4 years, and at some point, I'm going to have to be moved to a cheaper room. So, but anyway, it's all in the sense of fun and humor.
That's good. You're going to have to be moved to a cheaper room.
One thing that I've really not thought about till this point, and we never talked about, was the importance of being creative in your own, saving yourself. And like, for example, when I was doing the art program down at school, remember, it wasn't art. It was supposed to be teaching them to be creative. And if you're creative, you can think outside the box. If you're not, you can't. And so basically, everybody thinks inside the box. And so where the creativity comes in is to be able to think outside the box is where the survival is. And so that brings it back into line with the art. Now the question is, how does somebody without those art skills become creative? Well, it's simple. I mean, it's a state of mind. And but if you're not creative, you're going to take what they tell you, the diagnosis, and you're going to accept it. And because, I mean, if you get into quantum physics, or just explore all avenues of reality, you realize that as complex as this universe is, and as complex as our systems are, and all the potential, why can't we solve one little damn technical problem, like a tumor? And is it possible to think it away? Sure, who knows? But here's where the belief and faith come in. Do you have faith in what you're doing is working? And nobody knows, but if you have it, you know it's working. And I mean, there's somebody up there making a decision on whether it's your time or not. You are. In fact, if I could sum up all my spirituality by saying, if you're going to look for God, you look within, because you are it. It's inside of you, right? It's not somebody externally up there controlling things. And or if it is, and I'm wrong, it's still got to go through me and come from within. I don't know if it was a joke or story, but I think it was in India, and these two guys are on the riverbank, and they were very religious and very spiritual, and it's a huge flood, and the river's rising rapidly, and they're stuck on this little island, and they're going to die. And so this rowboat comes by, and one guy said, "Grab the boat." He said, "No, God will save us." And they let the boat go, and they drown. So the guy gets to heaven and faces God, and he said, "Why didn't you save us?" And he said, "I sent you the boat." And to me, that sums up the whole bit. You're given a certain amount. You're given all the tools, maybe to survive, to sort of save yourself, but that's the boat. And now, do you use all your skills, or are you just cruising and waiting to die? Because I guess I think we're all given the tools to survive if we really dig in deep and look for them.